Okay, I want to talk about Hannah Dustan. But first, before I bring her up, um, I want to mention scalping. I'm not sure if you know what scalping is. If you've ever seen a Western, then you probably know what scalping is. John Wayne did it occasionally. The Cowboys would have done it to the Indians. The Indians would have done it to the Cowboys in those stereotypical old Westerns. Um, Kind of fallen out of the vocabulary. So, um, well, scalping is what Hannah Dustan does to the people who are holding her captive. Mather reports that Hannah and her nurse were being held captive by 12 natives, and that Hannah and her nurse waited until everybody was asleep before they woke up, and they murdered 10 of the 12 native people. And if that's not enough, then they took the hatchets and scalped the 10 natives. So I'm wondering if you know what scalping is. Uh, to begin with, if you're going to scalp somebody, you lay that person on her belly. This is mostly women and children. So you'd lay that person on her belly, and then you would sit on the woman's back. Then you would pull her hair up like this by the front. And then when the woman's head is up, you would draw the blade across the skin and cut. And then you would pull again and cut and pull and cut and until you get to the back of the scalp, and then it would come free. And what you would end up with would be a hank of hair about 18 inches long, the big piece of skin covered with hair, the person's hair. So that's what Hannah Dustan does. She was clearly in a rage, and she got real revenge on her captors. What's interesting is how Cotton Mather shapes this story with his rhetoric. We feel proud of this heroic woman who murders Indians and tears off their scalps, and we are not in the least horrified by this, mostly because of the way Cotton Mather frames the story. So let's take a minute. So the Puritans were God-fearing people who believed devoutly in the teachings of the Bible. They had to have believed in the Ten Commandments, and if we hear John Winthrop right, they had to believe in love. So we've also seen that the Puritans believed that a woman's place was in the home with her husband and children, and that they should enjoy the role of being a mother and a wife, and they're not supposed to draw attention to themselves or really enter into the world of men and do manly things like kill Indians. Yet this woman, Hannah Dustan, is very unlike Mary Rowlandson. As we've seen, Rowlandson had to get the approval of influential men in order to make her account public with her book. And her story is the story of a patient woman who does God's bidding and waits for her rescue and for God's mercy. Hannah Dustan doesn't wait. Well, she waits until nightfall, and then she stands up with her nurse and drives the blade of that hatchet into the bodies of these sleeping men, women, and children. Then she cuts off the top of their heads and brings those scalps home, where she's rewarded with money and feted as a heroic figure. So this incident shows how far a group of people can stray from their most heartfelt beliefs. Think of the Christians, as Bartolome de las Casas calls them, the Christian Spanish settlers who murdered and raped the native peoples of the West Indies, and did it coldly, without even really thinking that what they were doing was some kind of a sin. Hannah Dustan, a good Puritan woman, was applauded for stepping out into the world of men and taking human lives. It was a gruesome, nasty business. Can you imagine the blood and the gore? And yet Cotton Mather, in his rhetorical twists, shows that she did the right thing even though her actions violated every principle that the Puritans held dear. In our own time, I think we can sympathize with Hannah Dustan and say that she did the right thing. Well, taking human scalps, maybe that's pushing it a bit, but we hold women to a different standard today. In our time, women can get jobs and work in the workplace. They can have lives. They can live on their own without the supervision of a man. They can earn money. They can go out to eat. They can vote. They can travel. And they don't have to reduce their existence to making babies and keeping a neat home. So we get it. We get it. Hannah Dustan is a badass. But how much principle and idealism did the Puritans have to swallow to uphold this woman as a heroine?